Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 11 now of the We Can Do Better conversations. We're here today, privileged to have with us Arlene Mendoza, Terry Nichols, and Caroline Fernandes to talk about the topic of the power of observation, building your noticing muscle, and why that's so important. And what is the impact of that as we navigate our life, our discovery of ourselves, and in our interpersonal interactions, whether personal or professional. And so we're going to come at this in multiple ways and have a diverse, inclusive, and rich conversation. I trust because I know these people. And so let's get started. So when I bring up this topic of the power of observation and building your noticing muscle, it's about awareness, right? It's awareness of self. It's awareness of energy in the space. For me, like Arlene, what does this mean to you in terms of observation, noticing muscle, and the power that can have?
Yeah, so what pops up in my mind initially when I thought of that and that question that you pose is this Viktor Frankl quote. So his book, The Meaning of Life, there was just one piece in there that has stayed with me. Since I read that book, and his quote is, and I have it here, is like, between the stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And I think when I think of observation, it's that moment and that gap for me between stimulus and response, which sometimes I just go to respond, like I just
Human
don't
nature,
really
right?
have a filter at all. But I think it's the awareness of knowing that small gap that exists, to give us a choice in how we respond as a result of the observation. So that's what's surfacing
Awesome.
for me.
Thank you for that. Caroline, what comes up for you?
Um, do you want the long answer or the short answer?
Let's go with whatever you feel is you want to share right now.
So, I'm spending some time these days working on this whole space that we're talking about, right? The dimension of spaciousness,
Mhm.
being able to recognize when are those moments when I'm getting upset. And most often it's in my interactions. It's when I'm putting myself out there and recognizing those patterns. They happen over and over again. It could be with the same people, it could be with the same triggers. And then just being able to observe that. Uh, and I've been listening to a lot of Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. And, I remember picking up The Power of Now several years ago and reading that book. Um, and most of it, I just couldn't, it wasn't connecting at all on many levels. And now when I go back, I just realized that uh, I've seen this with the Bhagavad Gita as well. Sometimes you can revisit a situation, or you can revisit a book, or you can revisit a person. But you have changed because you are more aware, versus the unconscious you in the past. And I think that's something that Arlene was also talking about right now. The whole, uh, the time and space thing that we understand, but also the opportunity to revisit even memories or past things in a way where we can be fully present right now to understand and investigate, if you will. What is it that caused me to get upset or have this rage, or several other things that are, don't feel good from a visceral point of view in your body,
Mhm.
but also the way it takes over you. It just takes over you, those thought forms.
Right.
So that's just something that I want to share right now.
Thank you for that. Awesome, man. We'll go deeper into this topic, I'm sure. And so Terry, how about you? What are your thoughts as we begin to talk about this topic?
Well, as somebody who's been a lifelong people watcher as a hobby, I found, and with considerable professional sales training and different things, reading body language, all those kinds of things. A lot of times, the ability to observe is really not well understood from the perspective of well, you learn how to read somebody's body language because you're trying to sell them something. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's more from the perspective of my thought process is to, am I communicating? Are you getting what I'm understanding? You know, what I'm sending to you, are you receiving it in the same way that I'm sending it? And if you're not, I can see that without having to embarrass you with a question. So I can change my vernacular, my cadence, different things, my body profile, so that I am more open and engaging when I'm talking to someone, whether that be the four of us here on Zoom or several hundred in a very large room. Yeah, it's really not a lot of difference when you're sending from authenticity.
Love that, Terry. And we're going to get deep into the personal aspects. Sort of Caroline and Arlene were talking that an internal, inside noticing, right? And then also interpersonal noticing and observation. For me, my journey, the thing that I've most connected with is I've expended my awareness is this notion of building my noticing muscle. And so we think of, you know, different frequencies that we can tune into, right? The physical, the intellectual, the spiritual. I got from Think and Grow Rich, right? Kind of connected me to that. And how at different points we connect to different frequencies, just like a radio frequency, right? Turn in to listen to a radio station. But that energy is all around us, right? And so what happens when we're able to connect to different frequencies of the energy that's around us? Or the energy within us, right? In terms of what's going on with us, right? Or we experience it for a different time. I love that, what you were bringing us to, whether it's a book or a memory, we're at a different place because we've changed, right? And so the experience changes. So we're essentially creating a new experience for ourselves. And where's the opportunity or the impact from that? And so as we go a little bit further with this, what is your story around your noticing muscle, building your noticing muscle, and how that's created better for you? So I guess,
can I share a story? Like I have a story when I was 4, and when I was thinking of the question about noticing and observation, I feel like I didn't realize it was a muscle I had for like the longest time, you know, because, you know, there's like a normality in how you operate. And I realized that when I was 4, I just noticed people's behaviors and emotions. And there was a family dinner, and there was, and it was one of those formal, kind of like formal dinners with all the plates and, you know, like the 10 sets of silverware and the water glass and all that fancy stuff. And so there was a gentleman, our family friend, at the head of the table, and he had his elbows on the table. And that was just like, you don't do that at these dinners. And then I thought, well, I can put my elbows on the table. And so I was 4 and I did. And then I got reprimanded, you know, and I just thought, but why is it that my mom yells at me and my aunt's yelling at me to take my elbows on the table, but yet there's this other individual who's not reprimanded, who's not being scolded? Like, and in my 4-year-old mind, I just observed not only like his behavior relative to my behavior, but the other adult's response to his behavior and my behavior, and then the social norm and this etiquette that was supposed to exist. And so I think that's the earliest memory I have of observing people's emotions, reactions, and then my little place in the world. So I think it started younger, and then I kind of didn't pay attention to things for a while, and I think as I got older, I started to become a little more aware and become curious about observing internal and external components.
When you talked about later on, talk about a little bit later on when you became more attuned to it, what changed for you?
I think honestly, it's been a bit of a gradual like evolution. I think the biggest shift for me around changing and observing is just asking myself the question. There was a lady, like this coach. I didn't really work with her, but she was a friend of mine, and she just said, she gave me some advice a couple years ago about observe how people feel when you're in the room, and how do they leave after an interaction with you. And I think those types of questions, as I started to be asked and be curious, is when I started to say, oh, I just never really thought about observing that piece in order to inform my noticing muscle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Arlene. And so this will be, you guys, I'm not going to just direct this thing, just jump on and add on to the conversation as we go. So you started getting to presence, right? Maybe increasing your presence and awareness of what's happening in the moment. It sounded like that that might have been happening for you. And that's what changed for me is I was on autopilot for a long time.
Yeah.
Kind of going through my routine, going to the same job, going for this, and you just get accustomed to just being on autopilot until something disrupts that, right? And so for me, things changed when I got into coaching program. The first program I went through, that's where the change happened for me in terms of reshaping my relationship with vulnerability, which helped me see differently. And ironically, guess what I work with people on now to help them see differently by being more vulnerable? It's the story becoming the purpose kind of thing. And so the element of presence and awareness and expanding awareness and awareness on multiple levels, like I was referring to earlier in terms of the intellectual, the spiritual, and just connecting to different frequencies, paying attention to energy and language have been tools. So as you think of, your experiences and your journey and creating better through that increased awareness, what comes up for you, Caroline?
So I think I'm a late bloomer from the perspective of becoming aware. You can read books, you can watch someone like this in a room like this, and it can still not really connect. It's all conceptual until you start to get outside your head. For me, when I was certifying for my coaching program, my master coach took me through this TA technique, transactional analysis technique. And I was 3 years old, and I don't even know where that memory came from, because back then I didn't even know about that memory. But that felt like a turning point, because even as I say this right now, I can feel my throat feeling stuffy, because that was one of those difficult memories, difficult experiences that I didn't even know that I had a lot of rage inside me. I didn't know that I had it. And it's like you said, you get, you're in this routine, you're stuck in the thought and the emotion and the doing and things like that. And it was all a pattern in terms of, the people I surrounded myself with, to the way I showed up at work, things that were triggering me. Sometimes you might get stung by something, and then you walk away, and then if someone hits you, you get angry with that person, but actually it's not the person that you're angry with, it's the sting that you've never really dealt with. And that's what happened to me until that memory surfaced. And what was interesting for me was that at the same time, very unconsciously, I was also, learning meditation. I was doing all these different other things thinking that I was doing it for my business, to get all these tools together to help other people. But what was happening was that I was opening up, and I was recognizing who is the observer, who is seeing these experiences, who's watching these thoughts, what is it? What is beyond this, the thing that I have been perceiving? So it's if I just feel this is always a journey, and it's a work in progress. Yet at the same time, when I look back, I can take a moment and kind of step away from the chatter. I can do that now. I was asleep all this while. Like, I always think, where was I all these years?
You too, huh?
Where was I?
So you are not alone, Caroline, let me tell you. So Terry, let's invite Terry, and then Caroline, in 5 minutes or so, we'll break so you can check in.
Thank you.
Terry, what are your thoughts?
Well, Eckhart Tolle rings a bell. My wife and I have read and taught about it on occasion. And Caroline really hit on something that is important in my life and my teachings, and as well as just who I am. And that's about presence, because presence is a point where manifestation becomes action. So whatever it is that you're manifesting for yourself, it could be spiritual, it could be a physical thing, a better career, whatever. But hitting that point of presence, then you are authentic with yourself. And once you are present and authentic with yourself, whatever you send out from that place, that heartfelt, that soul place, is really a definition of you. And it receives at the other end in the same manner, unless there's variables. Obviously, somebody who is not receptive to your personality or the way you vibrate or something like that, most anything you say is going to bounce off anyway. That's their problem, not yours. The key thing is, I have learned, like Caroline, I didn't know who I was until 10 years ago. I have searched all my life to find out, who is this guy, Terry? And I never even used my first name. I took on a nickname when I was 8 years old. And I stayed with that nickname until 56 years old. And so in getting back in touch with the original or the real me, Terry wasn't so bad anymore. When I was a kid, I hated the name. And you notice Earthwind there, I'm Native American. Well, I didn't know that until I was 46. That's a long story for another episode on a book. But in my work in repetitive behavior cellular regression, that's a question and answer sequencing tool that helps people with repetitive behaviors. In working with that noticing what people do unconsciously as they're talking and otherwise very calm, it can be very, very awakening. And so as people wanted to know more about me, just to let you know, there's a little over 11,000 Terry Nichols in the United States alone. So I'm kind of hard to find if you go out and try to find Terry Nichols. But like I said, I'm Chickamauga, Native American. And so my tribal name is Earthwind. It's kind of a cool way we say it.
Wow, it is cool.
Very cool.
And
it's Gadot Onule. And that means his breath across the earth. And that's another story and a journey. But what I decided was I wanted to make people aware that I'm an open book. Find out anything you like about me. So let's make it easy. So I started using the name with my tribal name, Terry Earthwind Nichols. Now, I don't care if you use Bing or whatever to research the name. You'll find anything you want to know about me. But I'm fine with that because I don't have anything to hide. My journey has been quite interesting. And where I'm going with all of this is really once that point came where I was present with who this Native American man was 10 years after I found out who I was, it really put me in a different position of peace. And we believe that if you have inner peace, you can give peace. So whatever you possess, you can give. Whatever you do not possess, you cannot give. If you don't love yourself, you're just not going to give love to people, or at least not for very long. So that's where I'm at with that.
Love that, Terry. So we'll take a little break now so Caroline can go check on her son.
Thank you.
You bet.
I will be
Check
back.
on that baby.
Can I
Awesome.
add to something? I don't know. Can I add something on that, Brian?
Sure.
Because what's coming up with what Carolyn was saying and what you guys were saying kind of about this autopilot, and then Terry about this presence and awareness, is this concept of be and do. And so recently for me, which again, I was just in this do, like do this, get this done, achieve this, move here, achieve this, do this. And it's really difficult. The concept of be or being and like this just be present in that moment. I think I struggle with that thought of be present, but I still got to do stuff, and I still like plan stuff. And if I will, how will I achieve this milestone if I'm just in this present? Like, and that's just been my own internal, dialogue in my head. And I think that the ability to observe on multiple modalities or levels, like you guys are talking about, like internal energy management, other people's emotional responses, the situation, the awareness of the room, or wherever it is you are, becomes even more refined, and it becomes more impactful once you just can wrestle with that presence and for me the concept of be and do. Because I felt once I was more in that presence type of, I don't know, mindset or just practice, then my observations were more profound. They were more insightful. They were just on a different level of observations. But I had to do this other work, I think. Well, I still am. like everything's a work in progress, but I think in order for that observation to have more meat, more substance, and the impact, like to manifest the impact that I hope to bring. So
I love that. Thanks for that, Arlene. And so we're getting to we can only influence what we can see, right? What we notice, right? So if we want to create change, we want to influence an outcome, if we can't see it, we can't shift it, right?
Or we can, but it might be limited. Like we might try and we might, whatever it is we do to influence that, but it may be it may be
limited. Yeah. And so our ability to do that is limited at best, right? To create that.
And I think adding to what the both of you are saying, what I got onto was the whole being and doing. I think that most of us are so caught up with the doing. It's, it's conceptual, we're in our heads, but when it comes from a space of being, that's really when, we can transcend and make it a lot more transformational.
That's the good word. I was looking for that word, Carolyn. I was
And that's when people are creating change, right? Change, transformation. It can be transactional. We can do a transactional interaction, or we can do a transformational shift, right? And so when we talk about power of observation and noticing so that we have more awareness, so we can engage differently, maybe communicate differently, maybe understand whether, like Terry's talking about, how our message is being received. Is it being received? Or how are we reacting to someone else's message internally? And how is that affecting how our presence and how we're showing up? And so it's all related to our ability to be present and see. And so think about that in terms of what is the implication of, like you say, maybe we can shift it, Arlene, but we're really limited in what we can do. Can you shift beyond what you can see? So we're building our noticing muscle, right? And if I'm trying to help a client achieve a goal, right? Working with a client, helping them to achieve their goal. And I have a story that's similar to theirs. And I think then, oh, I know how to help them change. I know exactly what they're going through. What if we're not aware of kind of where our energy is, and what does that do for our curiosity? What if we mute our curiosity in that situation, right? What happens, right? So we start to become only the lens we look through is our own, right? And so as human beings, when we're engaging with other people, we all look through our lens, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a human thing. But if we're looking to create relationships, connection, or influence, doesn't that necessitate our ability to see from another perspective?
You know, I think I have a learning moment that I've been through. What's coming up for me is when I did that bad. Like I remember early on in my career, I didn't have the awareness to be as curious. I had I felt like that my ego would take over a bit. And it was like right or wrong, black and white. I'm going to prove you with data. Like, this is the strategy. This is why. I just remember being a bit myopic sometimes in my view. And to your point of like you were with a client and meeting them where they are, I think that's such a powerful perspective, because I felt that I wouldn't always care to meet people where they were. I just wanted my initiative to move forward, even if it came at a cost, which is interesting because there's just been this evolution of that curiosity. Had I built that probably like a little earlier, and maybe it would have come out, or the outcome would have been a little more transformational, yet instead of transactional. And so I think now one of the things I think about is, and it's still really hard for me to like quiet all of these other pieces in my mind and stay curious when things get triggered, or when things surface for me in meetings, or just, you know, difficult conversations. I think it's that learning muscle of stay curious without that emotional impact that may always be there. Like, it may just be there, right? I may feel threatened or insecure or upset or mad, but the practice of staying curious to uncover what am I giving out, and what am I receiving, and why are certain exchanges occurring. So
Nice.
yeah.
It's that beginner's mindset, right? So that's been something that's been
It's humble. I think it's humbling. Like, you have to just, like, you're not, your ego, or I'm not always right. Like, my opinion and my perspective is from my lived experience. Like, honoring that everybody else has a different lived experience, and just because you're coming upset or mad in that moment may have nothing to do with me, like what Carolyn was saying. Yet I can take it personally.
Yeah, I think you got something there. You know, when we are listening to respond, or we are in a response mode, it's difficult for us to hear the true meaning of what's coming to us, because everything that's coming to us is being filtered with the single objective of throwing something back. And then you get that push, you know, and that's very inauthentic, and we all do it. It just happens, you know, and it can be a bad thing, it can be a good thing. It's like when you get really excited about talking about Navy football, I'm all over. Or you know, you talk to somebody, yeah, but you got to buy my stuff. Yeah, but you got to buy my stuff. Not only are you verbally throwing it out there, but energetically, body-wise, everything is coming right out. And for people who are sensitive to that, you might as well throw a punch at them, because that's what's going to happen, you know, rather than, again, we're coming back to two main words in this discussion that I'm noticing, and that's presence and transformation, because that presence is the point where manifestation becomes action. And when manifestation starts to become action, there is a transformation. You know, it's like our company, we're global transformational consulting and coaching. And that's what we teach and help people with. And so this conversation for me is mirroring people and not. You know, some people lack or have not been present with the people skills because they're introverted or for whatever reason, that they have a difficult time communicating. Doesn't mean they're dumb or anything like that. It just means that they don't have a connection with the ability to give you back what they perceive that you're asking for or whatever. And the more you push at them, the more they can step back. And pretty soon you're in fight, flight, freeze, and you're gone. You know.
And so you just brought up connection, and I think that's an element too we haven't gotten deep into yet, but I think that's what my story was around, disconnection, right? So we're going through the motions like I talked about, and Caroline mentioned it too, in terms of kind of going through your routine and kind of getting stuck in it. There's an element of disconnection happening there. At least there was for me. And it's like, all right, go through the routine, not have to really think about anything, not really noticing anything, going around the same drive to work. Notice, oh yeah, there are the trees, there's the traffic light. It's the same thing every day. And so there's a disconnection from the present moment, right? And so when we can connect back to the present moment and just be still and aware, it's amazing just being still, how that changes, right? Your energy, your awareness. And if you're able to then kind of quiet your mind and build practices around that so that you can kind of totally be present and connected, what's different with your ability to observe? And then how does that affect how you show up?
You know, that's a really good point, Brian. And in that, you know, when I'm speaking on the stage and we're selling, and when I tell people, you really want to be present with what you've got here, and you can take it home and really start to work with it. Change up everything that you do. Do not step back into the whole same route. Go upstairs, go to your room, and when you're packing to leave, put everything in backwards. Put nothing like you've ever packed your bags before. Change everything. Move around your purse. Where you usually put your cell phone, put it in a different position. You're changing up and removing the rut, because as soon as you get home, you get in a car, your car or somebody else's car, you go down the same old street, you drive up the same old house, you drive into the same old garage, you open up the door out of the garage into the house, you put your bags down because you see a bunch of stuff waiting for you. Or you come up back to your company, you step into your office and there's 50 things sitting there. It's got to be accomplished today. So what happened to this conference you just did? Poof. But if you change everything, you take a different route home. You don't park in the garage. You park on the street or in a different position than you normally do. You come in the front door and you change everything up so that your presence with what it is that you're starting to manifest for yourself sticks. Does that make sense, you guys?
Mm-hmm.
It does. And so this whole thing about newness, right? Creating disruption to create new patterns. And biologically, we connect to new patterns. We're more aware when there's something new. Our antenna is up a little bit differently in terms of, I think about neuroplasticity and building new neural pathways, taking a different route to the grocery store. I mean, it seems so simple, but it breaks a pattern, right? It breaks a pattern and it stimulates your brain to say, okay, now this is not the typical way we do this. And then you start kind of stimulating things there. And so this element of curiosity is based on newness. What can I learn that's new? How can I expand my perspective? How can I expand the insights I might have around myself? Like Caroline was talking about, going deeper internally, looking inward for this. And so this newness factor is why curiosity is so important and why connection is so important. And presence is so important, and they're interconnected, right? And so whether it's on stage or whether it's kind of discovering yourself, this element of, openness. What can I notice differently in my engagement with my spouse or my friend in the conversation? What can I notice new about them? What can I celebrate about them? You start thinking about different ways to engage that shifts the dynamic. What can I be grateful for if we want to go like into a different way of being, right? What can I be grateful for about each of you, right? And so, Caroline, as we kind of think about this in terms of opening up and, you know, self-discovery, what comes up for you?
You know, the interesting part was I was just watching this video a few hours ago um, around self-acceptance. Uh, this book by, I forget the author, Radical Self-Acceptance. I think her name is,
Tara Brock.
thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. Awesome.
And the whole piece around, well, several pieces. One is around what can I be okay with? You know, and notice that because a lot of times we tend to attach complacency and looking at complacency as maybe like a bad thing, or is it like the opposite of self-acceptance? And what came up through that conversation was around curiosity. So I was taking what all of you were talking about in, because you know, a lot of times the side of us that wants to look smart or wants to look bigger than everybody else is probably saying, oh, but I already know that. And then the moment I do that, I'm already shutting down to what possibility there is beyond the known. And actually it's self-defeating, because I'm getting in my own way. In a subconscious way, something inside me knows that's new. Do I really want to go there? Is it scary? Is it something that's going to threaten my identity? And so let me just shut it down. Let me just dismiss even being present by switching off. And so just the element of staying open, and the word, using the word awe, AWE, which is, there's a term for it, because it's kind of like it's a word that's actually a sound, right? When you're in awe of something, like the way children are, you know, and you kind of let go of your thought. There's no thought behind it. You're just being, and you're like fully present over there, absorbing that entire experience in. That itself can be so profound. And so those are some things. You spoke about gratitude. I mean, these are things that can seem seemingly simple, but they're not. I mean, it creates such an overwhelming shift in the way you can revisit situations that make you feel miserable, or make you look at yourself or someone else in a negative way. Um, I know that a lot of times I have projected my own self-loathing onto other situations and other people, just because I do not want to take responsibility for what's going on inside of me. But by looking at that, and it's a really hard process, because all I want to do is run and hide, or dig my head into the phone, or distract myself with something that is superficial, it can be hard to be present for myself. But then when I do that, and what's interesting is that the fear of it, acknowledging it, is actually harder than acknowledging it. The fear is heavier. But when you go to the other side, it is such a breakthrough. You know, it's like, wow, is it really this great?
I love that you said that, right? And so the fear is always heavier than reality. And a personal example is starting videos for me, right? I was like, it was so in my mind all the time. And I'm like, mental objections, mental objections. I started doing them last November. I'm like, what was I all worried about, right? It's like, really, Brian? And so I started a little bit of self-judgment, self-loathing, like you're talking about, Carolyn. It's like, but we're human, right? We've all got our version of that, right? And so, so then if you're going to be gentle with yourself, is where's the learning here? Where's the opportunity? Oh, well, I've learned that it's not that big a deal. And I learned that I really actually like it. And you know what? What do I like about being on video? I like being on video with other people. Oh, how might I create a dynamic and a conversation where we can share perspectives on a topic and have that be a learning experience for us and hopefully for others that listen to it. And so that's like a recent one that came to mind as you're sharing that. I love that, Caroline. It was awesome. And your point about off, just let me talk about that for a second. The word that came to mind when you said that a companion type word is wonder, right? A wonder for a kid. Oh, the wonder. It's an experience, right? There's no like mental thought processing. It's just being in awe and wonder when you're learning something for the first time, right? It's that beginner's mindset. Oh my God, awe and wonder at the miraculousness of this, trapeze artist or somebody that's got a special skill that you're just amazed at, or just learning something new for the first time as a child. You're seeing like the ocean for the first time or something along those lines. That's what's amazing about, us as human beings. It's just, wow. And about nature and about life, it's like, wow, this is a pretty amazing world we live in. And how often do we, for whatever reason, like shutting ourselves down, right? I talk about my story and I say I shut myself off from the best parts of myself for a long period of time because I didn't have this awareness and noticing, or I just accepted, right? I accepted what was, and maybe a little bit complacent, but I didn't remain in the curious mindset of what other possibilities might be there. How might I look at the current state differently in terms of potential job, career paths, relationship paths, how I might engage with friends and family differently until recently. So Terry, you talked about your story being fairly recent. Mine are too. So the people listening, this isn't like, oh yeah, you got to have everything figured out by 22 or everything figured out by 30. There's no like book on life.
Strategic plan developed.
And like when you get past a certain age, that doesn't mean like life ends. No, it's just beginning for us is what several of us are talking about. And it's all how we look at it. It's a choice of how we choose to look at it. And so just the shift for me to be in a beginner's mindset and curiosity and look at the amazement of, wow, I never looked at that topic or that thing in that same way before. And that's why I love diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. It makes you question, how much do I really know about anything? I know what I know, but how much do I really know? Until I look at it from a different perspective. Maybe I look at it from upside down or from a 90-degree angle or from, underwater or something like that. But there's always a different way to look at it that can enrich the conversation or your perspective. And at the end of the day, isn't all we have is our perspective, which may be our truth, but may not be the truth?
Well, and I want to add something about community and what Carolyn was saying about this piece of fear and this, the transformation piece and the learning piece. And I feel like my own process and journey has been enriched as a result of finding a community that is curious without judgment and is kind of just like creates psychological safety. Like I feel like there's these other pieces that also must exist for these transformational, like interpersonal components, because if you're trying to do it alone, it can be isolating, and these other emotional pieces can become really overwhelming, right? Because you're thinking, you're learning, you're processing in a different way, in a way that you maybe not be wired. And so I think there's this piece of connection and community that, which is why I love LinkedIn and I love the Humans First community, because I felt really isolated as I was challenging, being really, really curious. reading all kinds of books, attending all kinds of conferences and seminars, some days I felt a bit alone in my search, because it wasn't always so apparent in my network or in my circles, like these types of conversations. So there's this, I think there's a need and a necessity that as to support one another as we're all going through these questionings, because you also, like, somebody also can hold up a mirror to you and say you're not crazy, like what you're going through and what you're feeling, and like, I got you, I've been there, I've experienced the same thing. It's kind of a human experience. It's of transformation. So
I want to add something to what uh, you're saying, and what's coming up in my mind is, for me as well, community has been, for someone who handcrafted a community because of this, because of the challenges that I perceived. Now, when I look back, I realize the perception of it all, but the need for a safe space, the need to belong, the need to share, but also listen and sometimes just be passive, was really important. Yet at the same time, what I want to add as a layer to this, what's coming up, is how self time is really important as well.
mhm,
The, the time and space that I can give myself by stepping away from it all, to kind of reflect and kind of search and see what's going on, and how do these stories and how do all these resources, how do they uh, you know relate to my story, and how much of it is just my, of course, um, in Hinduism there's something called Maya means illusion, and that all of life, and Tony Robbins, I don't know if that's a bad example, but through NLP he talks about this too, right? I mean, we're all hallucinating, and he says that you might as well choose the hallucination that you want to be in. And so stepping back from an experience, and recognizing that dimension of spaciousness where I can watch the experience, who is watching it, right? Who is watching the me? And I feel that at this point in my life, that seems to be, even though, being a part of communities, sharing all these things, I feel I'm at a point where I'm giving myself a lot more of that downtime to recognize how much of that is, in my mind, and what am I really focusing on? What can I switch my emotional state, why I'm doing it, and why it's important for me. And so these are some things that I'm continuing to go deeper into.
Love that, Caroline. And it's that kind of stopping, pausing, and reflecting. And reflection is so powerful. And it's sort of like there's a spectrum that we're all on in terms of balancing self-time with time with others. And we sort of need both as human beings, right? The need to kind of be seen and heard, and human connection. And we all need that, but we also need time to kind of be with ourselves. And when we're doing that, things to think about is, how are we talking to ourselves? What kind of language are we using? I mean, there's just when you're doing that, my journey, it's like, what kind of language am I using with myself? Oh, that's interesting. Like non-judgmental. Everything is about, if there's judgment there, then it kind of shifts the dynamic a little bit. But if just do it non-judgmentally, it's like you can learn a lot just by paying attention and reflecting and being with yourself. And so that gives you an opportunity and the space to say, wait, now I have choice, right? We're always in choice. I can change that. Is that really the way I want to show up with myself? Because if I'm showing up with myself this way, guess what else is probably happening? It's probably manifesting, to Terry's language, into how I'm showing up with others, right? And so it can be really powerful to just give yourself, and introverts, I mean, if you're introversion, extroversion, there's a different level of need based on where you are on that spectrum. But as humans, I think we all need some downtime, as Caroline's saying, just to kind of connect. And it's a reconnection mechanism, right? It's a connection mechanism we all need, because at some point we're going to need to kind of just be with ourselves. And so as we kind of think about and wind down this conversation on the power of observation and building your noticing muscle, think about one thing that you'd share with the folks in terms of a learning or something to take away and kind of integrate into their life that will help expand the conversation around observation, right? We talked about community being part of it, and that's, there's an element of community that's important too, because we need human connection. What is it that you would leave with the audience with as a takeaway or an invitation as we conclude our call today? So I guess we'll start with Arlene.
So I think I would lead with the beginners and the curious mindset around observation, and to inquire with curiosity, both of yourself and of the situation and of others.
Love the three dimensions there. It's self, others, and the situation, right? There's a triad of dynamics going on there, right? It's similar in the strengths world, right? It's, the strengths that I have, the strengths you have, and, what are the needs of your strengths, what are the needs of someone else's strengths, and what is the needs of the situation. I love that three-dimensional look at that. Arlene,
yeah. And if that's a lot, like, I don't want to overwhelm, then just start with one. So
no, but that's an invitation you're making.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're making the invitation, but it can start with one, right? Start with yourself, right? Relationship with self is always a really good place to start. Caroline.
Start where you are.
Start where you are. Yes. Great point, Terry. Caroline, how about you?
I don't know if this is I don't know if the word holds or sticks, but what's coming in my mind is to educate oneself, to know that there is something out there that might help you on your journey, and to educate yourself. And it's kind of what we're all saying right now. It could be through community, it could be through books or resources, or just as everyone is saying out here, just the curiosity. What could this be if not for my perspective? What else is out there? And maybe education is not the right word, I don't know, but I just feel that this learning journey, I just feel that feeding the soul, from that perspective, it does such wonderful things for the mind. It does such wonderful things for the body, and so the inside out approach is something that comes up in my mind.
Love that, Caroline. I love your question. What could be different if not from my perspective? What a wonderful question. What an invitation to see differently, think differently. And what does that open up? I love that, Caroline, an inside out of that. Terry, how about you?
Well, we talked about presence already, and that's very important. A lot of times, and it's come through in the discussion a couple of times today, there are no good choices, there are no bad choices, there's simply choices. We make a choice based on the information we have available to us at any moment in time. And as humans, as more information comes in, we get to make a new choice or keep the same one. And being present with the ability to make your choices based on who you are and what you are and what it is that you want to accomplish, good, better, and differently. That's what you're doing. We're out here in this discussion today between the four of us, and all of you that are out here going to be listening to this is simply this. If I was to tell you anything, it's just be you. And if you can be anything, be kind.
Love that invitation, Terry. Thank you for that. So for me, building the noticing muscle has been something I've talked about for a while, and you've all given me different ways to look at that, which I appreciate. And that's what this is about, right? It's about inviting different perspectives and ways of looking at things that helps us extend our learning, extend this conversation, which we hope you all will do in the comments, and bringing more people into the conversation, and extending the learning beyond just the four of us to your communities. So please share your thoughts there. The thing that connects with me most about this is the notion of just removing any judgment from this process. Just look at it as an observer of self, right? In terms of what might I learn from this? And sort of like Caroline's question too, if not from my perspective, what might show up for me, right? What might there be that I'm not currently seeing that might help me? And so thinking of questions that open up the possibility would be my invitation for you, because therein is the power mechanism to shift how you might see to create better. And so as we conclude today's We Can Do Better conversation, I'd like to thank Arlene Mendoza, Caroline Fernandes, and Terry Nichols for being with us. And I'd like to ask each of you, starting with Arlene, so how can people connect with you? What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Oh, best way is LinkedIn. So Arlene
LinkedIn?
Mendoza, drop me a note, send me a request.
Awesome.
Happy to connect.
Caroline.
Mine as well. LinkedIn, Caroline Cares Fernandes.
Fantastic. Terry, also LinkedIn or something else?
You can find me everywhere. Look up Terry Earthwind Nichols, because I am everywhere, you know. And that's what I suggest, because there's so many platforms that myself and my company are on.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest way to do it is just to scrub out those thousands of Terry Nichols out there and just do a search on Terry Earthwind Nichols, and you'll find us right here at LinkedIn. Humans First is a good place to start.
Humans First is a good place to find all of us, right?
Nice plug for our team. But that's a big thing. Terry Earthwind Nichols. Find out anything you like. Reach out to me, and let's have a chat.
Awesome, awesome. So with that, well, thank you for everybody for being with us, and for you for listening to this episode.
Thank you, Brian.
And we look forward to creating better with you together. Thanks.